The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Hello everyone, producer Pat here, host of the Friday Bonus Show. I have a couple interesting stories for you today, and I'm excited to get right into them. So we're going to start with Michael Bloomberg making preparations for a 2020 run. You, of course, all know Michael Bloomberg. He's the former mayor of New York City, and he's planning to file paperwork to file for the Democratic presidential primary in Alabama. That deadline is today, so he's going to have to do it if he's going to at least be able to continue to consider a run. I thought his consideration of a run in 2020 was over, but apparently not. This move would be the first step towards a national campaign, of course, and he's done this song and dance before. Every election cycle over the past 10 years, Michael Bloomberg has floated the idea of running. I think sometimes taking it more seriously than others. Back in 2016, he was thinking about running third party, but then he said that he was worried that that would throw the election to Trump, and he didn't want to do that, so that's why he didn't run then. And then earlier this year, he was weighing a presidential run again, but then once former Vice President Joe Biden announced that he was going to run, Bloomberg decided to bow out, to not pursue that. And I guess the idea being that Joe Biden had it on lock, or that Joe Biden was like a centrist and matched the political positions of Michael Bloomberg closely enough where it wouldn't make sense for both of them to run. But now I guess Joe Biden's position as the front runner is in question. I think he is still number one in the polls, but it's not so clear cut that he's going to win anymore. He may not, and we all kind of see him falling apart in front of our very eyes. Like 1 week he'll pop a blood vessel in his eye, and in another week he'll talk about how kids have to hear the record player and hear words. So we all know that like Joe Biden's candidacy has been kind of gaffe prone, and there's been many things exposed out of him that should show that maybe he's not the best candidate to run against Trump. So Michael Bloomberg at least positioning himself to step in the case that Joe Biden tanks more in the polls. And so we have a quote that I love from one of his campaign spokespeople, or not campaign spokespeople, I suppose, because he hasn't actually officially ran, but someone who works for him. They said, he's tired of being the almost ran. Morality is weighing heavily on him. This is the last time that he can run. And that's exactly what this is. This is about Michael Bloomberg. This isn't about the country. This is about his own ego. This is about Michael Bloomberg wanting to make sure that people know that he exists, and that people are considering him for being president. He wants to make sure that he's in the news. And it does make sense that this would be his last opportunity to run. He's 77 years old, which is around the same age as Biden and Bernie, I think, within a year or two. And of course, Michael Bloomberg is also a billionaire. He's worth $52 billion. And how is that going to play in the Democratic primary? I mean, it seems like the tide is sort of turning against billionaires in the Democratic Party. Certainly when you take a look at like the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren position on things, I think, approval of billionaires overall is going down. And their people aren't going to necessarily support that. Tom Steyer, of course, he jumped into the race late, was able to qualify for the most recent debate. He's also a billionaire, and he was only able to even enter the primary and be taken seriously as a contender because he is a billionaire. It's not like the guy held political office before. If he was anyone else, he would not have been able to jump onto the stage in the way that he did. But if there's any good news, Tom Steyer is not polling well right now. I think he's at about 1%. His campaign's not going anywhere. I would imagine if Bloomberg jumped in at this late stage, his campaign also would go nowhere. And of course, you take a look at Michael Bloomberg's record in New York City. It's not the best. I mean, I'm not going to say that he went without accomplishments, but the two major things that you think about when you think about Michael Bloomberg's mayorship in New York City, one was perpetrating stop and frisk. Of course, that unconstitutional practice where police would be able to, without a warrant, search people on the streets for drugs or whatever they wanted to search them for. Typically, the people that were searched were minorities, of course. I don't think that these people in expensive suits on Wall Street were getting searched for cocaine. I think it was more people in Harlem getting patted down for marijuana, and then, of course, having to face the legal consequences if they get caught with it. Michael Bloomberg defended that practice. He claimed that that lowered the crime rate in New York City. There's no evidence to suggest that. Maybe there was a correlation, like maybe crime was going down, but it had been going down for decades before. So he's known for stop and frisk, which is not a liberal policy, that's for sure. He's also known for the large soda ban, which I suppose you can argue is like a liberal policy, but like it's more of like a nanny state thing. It's not something that everyone agrees with. I don't think that's the type of thing that, regardless of if you agree with the large soda ban or not, I don't think it's the type of thing that is going to play well in like the Rust Belt states. Like if a Democrat is trying to win in Iowa or trying to win the states that we lost to Trump in 2016, like Wisconsin and Michigan, whatever, you're gonna be able to do that with having a large soda ban on your record. Like even if you don't want to make that national policy, that's not the issue that you want to focus on. That's not the issue that you want Trump to berate you over the head over, which you know that he would do. And so it's late in this game. I can't imagine Michael Bloomberg coming in at this point, although he wants to keep his options open. He really does have this hero complex where he thinks that he can come in and save the day. He wants people talking about him, and I suppose I'm kind of buying into that in a sense, but I do it in a way that's sort of ridiculing him. So I think that's all well and good then. Michael Bloomberg, please don't run. We don't want to see it. And if you decide to run, you probably just face the same fate that Tom Steyer did and get 1% of the vote and get laughed out of the primary altogether. And that's probably what would happen. So we've been talking all week here on the bonus show about homelessness in this country, about the crisis that is homelessness in this country, and the different ways that cities and companies too are trying to combat it. So on Tuesday we talked about how Apple is donating $2.5 billion to help the homeless situation in California, and part of that money is going to go to home investment funds, part of it to home buyer mortgage assistance. They're actually going to donate some physical land that they have in San Jose. So that was a great proposal by them. Very happy to see that. And then yesterday we talked about how Las Vegas decided to take a different approach and to ban sleeping outside on the Strip when there are homeless shelters nearby available. So if you're caught sleeping outside, you may have to face some sort of like jail sentence or a fine. And that's totally crazy. How is that solving the homelessness crisis? By criminalizing it, you're just going to make things worse. It just seems so unhuman to ban something as natural as sleeping outside, especially if you have nowhere to go and you're just trying to live your life. Like that's just something that you have to do, and to lock people up for that was insane. So we talked about that yesterday. Texas is taking a different approach. So Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott is planning to begin housing the homeless on state land. There's apparently a 5-acre plot of state land in southeastern Austin, and what they want to do is set up a property where people will have portable restrooms, and they'll have like hand washing statements, and they'll actually like have an agreement set up with local charities that the charities will be able to come in and like provide basic resources for these people, food and sanitation, that sort of thing. This is coming off the heels of a decision that was made to clear out a bunch of homeless people who are living in the underpasses of Austin. The cops came in, they said you all have to go, and then within a few hours people had resettled there, which makes all the sense in the world because people are resilient and they'll find a way, and it's just not a good use of city resources to have cops constantly patrolling underpasses. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So, of course, that wasn't going to be a good permanent solution. This move, though, made by the governor, I think, is heading in that direction. And also what the city of Austin is trying to do for a more longer-term solution is to raise $14 million to build and operate one or more homeless shelters. And I guess they can get about 150 bunk beds with that money and be able to operate the shelter with that money. So, this is a good, interesting decision. I mean, if I was a property owner in that area, if I had land that was adjacent to this 5-acre plot where they're going to set up campgrounds, I wouldn't be all that excited. I mean, certainly I would worry about my home value. That's just like sort of one of those negative externalities, though. And it's not in my backyard issue because no one wants to have like a homeless camp near them, especially if you've paid a lot of money for your house. But I think ultimately, if you take a look at what's going to do the most good, you have to come down on the side of the campgrounds. That, at least for now, at least until we've come up with a better, sensible solution for the crisis in this country, everyone has to make some sacrifices. And I would hope that at least some people are able to look at it from that perspective. I think overall, even when you consider those negative externalities, this is the right decision. But let's remember at the end of the day too that like this is a solvable issue. The numbers have been crunched, and from anywhere between $20 billion and $80 billion, we can fix homelessness in this country, effectively ending it. Of course, it's hard to put a definite number on that because it's this type of thing that you have to constantly reinvest in. But that $20 to $80 billion number isn't that much. Like, that's less than what we added to the military budget in between the last two National Defense Authorization Acts. So just to put it into perspective, we could definitely solve this issue if we decided to make it a priority here in this country. And of course, this is the effect of income inequality. Like when a big tech giant comes into a city and offers $100,000 a year plus jobs to people, that's great. But it comes along with other things. It comes along with the cost of living for everyone else going up and property values going up. And, people often get priced out and they can't afford to live in that community anymore, even though that's maybe their home. That's maybe the only place that they know, and maybe there's no other opportunities for them elsewhere. So this is how the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that if a rich person is getting more and more money, that a poor person necessarily has to get poorer. But it does happen, and homelessness is getting worse and worse over the past 10 years when we've had this booming economy. It's not like people at the very bottom have been able to see the fruits of that. And I think this is like the easiest way to demonstrate that. Tech companies, I think, have to take responsibility. That's what we saw from Apple when we talked about that story earlier in the week, because they are causing this. And it's also just the right thing to do. Governments, of course, have to take responsibility as well. And even if tech companies don't want to do it out of the goodness of their heart, even if they calculate that even with the good PR that they would get, and maybe the investment wouldn't be worth their money. Well, you have to think long term, right? Because if you have a population of people who can't afford housing, who are out on the streets and who are desperate, it will create some instability in your society. It could cause people to revolt. It certainly won't allow people to buy your products. I mean, that's for sure. So this is something that we all sort of have to step up on and make it more of a priority in this country. And I think if we are able to get a Democratic president in office in 2020, no matter who it is, I honestly think that no matter who it is, we'll be able to make it a priority. We'll continue to follow it. Everyone, enjoy the weekend. Thanks for tuning in.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.